Welcome y'all to Robyn on the Farm. Today I'm going to show you exactly how to make this beautiful loaf of maple white bread using the dough cycle on your bread machine. Let's get started. This maple white bread is so easy to put together. Today I'm going to make it using the dough cycle of my bread machine. You can also put all these ingredients into your bread machine and just let it totally make it in the bread machine. Or you can get out your stand mixer if you want to do it that way, if you're familiar with that, or you can make it by hand. It is a great recipe. There's only 7 ingredients, super simple to put together. Let's just get started. I am going to start with 3/4 of a cup of hot water. You want it to be about 105 to 110 degrees. I just put my tap all the way to hot and let it run for a minute, and then it's perfect. So you don't want it to be too cool that your yeast doesn't activate, and you don't want it to be so hot that it kills your yeast. But about 105, 110 is perfect. Then we want 1/2 cup of milk. I'm using 1/2 cup of whole milk. You can use milk alternative or skim milk or whatever you want. But the milk will make your bread fluffier and have a better texture than if you just use all water. So 1/2 cup of milk. And then our next ingredient is oil. I'm going to use some coconut oil. You can use any kind of oil that you want. I just really like the taste of the coconut oil with the maple. I think it goes really well together. So I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of oil. You can use 2 tablespoons of any oil, or you can use 2 tablespoons of melted butter. Just put that right on in there into your bread machine pan. And our next ingredient is the maple syrup. This is pure maple syrup, not the breakfast kind of syrup that maybe you would use for pancakes, the unhealthy stuff. This is the real good stuff. Pure maple syrup. This is from Canada. I'm going to use 1/3 of a cup of pure maple syrup. It is going to make the bread taste so good. And this is that time of year where maple, just is amazing. So I was really in the mood for this bread today, so I was like, I've got to make this recipe. So 1/3 of a cup of pure maple syrup. And next we want 4 cups of flour. So I'm going to use bread flour. If you use bread flour, you'll get a higher risen bread. It's just better, I think. But if you only have all-purpose flour, go ahead and use all-purpose flour. I know that the cost of these flours is going up, and I know that the bread flour does cost a little bit more than the all-purpose, so just go ahead and use all-purpose if that's what you have. So 4 cups of flour. And our next ingredient is salt. This is some ancient fine sea salt that I've just started using. It's kind of fancy, it's not needed. You can totally just use some plain old white table salt. But I'm gonna use 1.5 teaspoons of salt. So any kind of salt that you want, just put 1.5 teaspoons right on into your bread pan. This stuff is really pretty. It's like a pink color. It's kind of like the Himalayan pink salt, but this is actually from Utah. And our very last ingredient is yeast. Now I'm going to use my active dry yeast. I love this stuff. I store this stuff in the freezer and it stays good way past the expiration date. You know, back in 2020 when all that stuff was going on and nobody could find yeast, well, I had like 10 of these in my freezer. So I was good to go, and I was making a ton of bread then. So store it in your freezer, get it out. It's gonna stay good forever. But you're gonna want 2 teaspoons of yeast. Now you can use bread machine yeast, rapid rise, instant, doesn't matter for this recipe. Any kind of yeast is good, but use 2 teaspoons. And those are all of our ingredients for this maple white bread. So easy, right? So now I'm gonna put this bread pan into my bread machine. This is my Zojirushi bread machine. I love it. It has the double paddles. It's quiet. This is my favorite bread machine, and I have used a ton of bread machines over the last 20 years. This is the one I like. So I am going to just choose the dough cycle. Dough, and press start. And this is gonna mix it up, knead it, and let it rise. It's gonna take about 1.5 hours for the dough cycle. And at the end, we're gonna have this beautiful dough that's ready to shape into a loaf and then throw into the oven. So I'll show you this dough in just a couple minutes so that you know exactly what your dough should look like. As long as you check your dough once it starts kneading and it's a good texture, it's not too wet and not too dry, then you'll know that your bread is gonna turn out great. So I'll show you what it should look like in just a few minutes. I just started the bread machine just a couple minutes ago, so I am checking on the dough. It is looking really good. This is what I like to do. I like to come in with a rubber spatula and just kind of get the rest of the ingredients that are kind of stuck around the sides. Get those in there so they can get incorporated into the ball of dough. But this dough is looking really good. It's not too sticky. So that means it's not too wet, it's not too dry. It looks like it's coming together really well. Now, if yours is sticking to the sides and bottom, then go ahead and add about 1/8 of a cup more of flour until it looks more like this. Or if yours is really dry and crumbly for some reason, then add maybe a tablespoon of water until it looks more like this too. Now, as this keeps going, it's gonna get even smoother and better looking. This is just a few minutes into the cycle. But now I know that my dough looks great and I can be confident that my bread is gonna turn out wonderfully. So I'm gonna just close the door and let the dough cycle do its thing. It's gonna take about 1.5 hours. The dough cycle is just about complete for our maple white sandwich bread. And while I'm waiting for it, I just want to show you how I prepare my bread loaf pans. So this is my cast iron bread loaf pan. I love cast iron. I bake in it, I cook in it, I love everything about it. I think it's indestructible, it's gonna last forever, and it also doesn't have any of those chemicals that could get into our foods. So I love cast iron. Let me just show you how I prepare my pan before I put my bread dough in it. I take a little bit of olive oil. Sometimes I'll use coconut oil, but I'm just gonna pour maybe a tablespoon of oil into the bottom of my bread pan. And then I just take a paper towel. You could use one of those brushes if you want, but I'm pretty low fuss. And so I do things the easy, quick way. So I just take a paper towel and I just rub this oil all over the bottom, all in the corners, and all over the sides. And this just ensures that after you've made a beautiful loaf of bread, that your bread's not gonna stick to your bread pan. There's nothing worse than making a beautiful loaf of bread and then trying to get it out of your bread pan and having it break and crumble, and that would just be so sad, because this is gonna turn out great. And if you do this, your bread is just gonna slip right on out. So that's what I recommend doing no matter what kind of bread pan you use. You could spray, but the spray just really doesn't get it quite good enough. Okay, this is ready. I'm gonna grab our dough and shape it, and we'll throw it into this loaf pan and pop it in the oven. The dough cycle is complete. Look at that beautifully risen dough in there. Oh, that looks fantastic. It's time to get it out and shape it. Look at this dough for our maple white sandwich bread. Doesn't that look amazing? It looks so great. It rose so great in this bread pan. Okay, so the dough cycle does a great job. I really like using the dough cycle. It's so easy just to throw all the ingredients in there and let the bread machine do the work for me. I love that about the bread machine. So this is what I'm gonna do now. I am gonna take this dough, and even though it looks so beautiful, I'm gonna punch it down. I'm just gonna punch it down while it's in the bread pan. Once you have it all punched down, then just turn it out onto your nice clean countertop. You want to press it out into like a rectangle shape, and you want it to be shorter on this side and longer on this side. So you're going to want to make this about as long as your bread pan that you're using. So press it out really nicely, and then I'm just going to shape this into a loaf of bread. This is what I like to do. I do the head down, shoulders in method. So I pull the top down, and I pull in the shoulders or the sides, and then I press it out with the palms of my hand. And then I continue to roll it down into a nice log. This will give you really good surface tension for your loaf. It'll give you a really pretty loaf of bread, but it'll also give it a really nice texture. It won't have a bunch of holes inside or anything like that. It'll give you a nice tight crumb. Now, just pinch the seams together on the sides and on the bottom. This is looking really great. You can be rough with it, you can throw it around, you can slam it against the counter if you want to, but it is ready. This is gonna be so good because I can smell the maple in it. It smells fantastic. Okay, now I'm gonna take my loaf pan, I'm just gonna plop that in there, and it is ready to rise for the second time. Now, I'm just gonna leave this dough in my bread pan like this, and I'm gonna let it rise just long enough to let my oven preheat to 350 degrees. The second rise doesn't have to be very long. So as soon as my oven is preheated to 350 degrees, I'm gonna throw it in there. But I will show you what it should look like before you put it in the oven. My oven just preheated to 350 degrees, and this dough has risen so nicely. You just want it to be peeking above the edge of the bread pan, a little bit more than that, and this one looks perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw this into the oven at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. Okay, y'all, here is our fresh loaf of maple white bread, fresh out of the oven. It's nice and hot. Oh, doesn't it look gorgeous? Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I like to take some butter and just rub it all over the bread right as it comes out of the oven. This will give you really nice soft crust. Oh, and it looks so pretty with that pretty shine too. Now I'm just gonna turn it out from the loaf pan. Let's see how well it comes out. Oh yes, came out great. Oh, it's upside down. I don't really want that. But because we oiled up our loaf pan so well, the bread just slid out. Look how gorgeous that looks. Okay, so this is what I'm gonna do. I like to rub the butter all over the bread. Let me put some down here too. This will give you really nice soft crust, and I like soft crust. I don't use baking racks or cooling racks. I like to just do this. I like to cover my bread in a nice tea towel, and I just like to let it sit there and cool off that way. This won't give you like soggy crust or anything. It'll just give you a nice soft crust. So I'm gonna let this cool just for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna cut into it. Okay, our bread has been cooling just for a little while, and I am ready to cut into it. If you let your bread cool all the way, you'll get a better crumb and texture. It won't be as crumbly, but this one's pretty cool, and I think it's gonna be fine. So let's go ahead and cut into this. Oh yes, this looks absolutely fantastic. And I can smell the maple. Oh, it smells so good. Look at that. Look at that beautiful slice of bread. Doesn't that look so good? Oh, it does. It looks so, so good. And it's nice and soft. And it's a beautiful golden color. I will put the printable recipe for this maple white bread down in the description. People ask me all the time how I like to keep my bread fresh, so I'll also put a link for these bread bags. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next time on Robyn on the Farm.
Robyn's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that